The late afternoon sun streamed through the stained glass windows of Sacred Heart Church, painting rainbow patterns across the polished wooden pews. Simone Lawrence stood at the very back of the sanctuary, her hands folded calmly in front of her pristine white suit. The fabric was expensive, tailored perfectly to her frame, and she knew she looked incredible. She'd made sure of it. At the altar, her husband was getting married. Well, technically her ex-band. The divorce had been finalized exactly 6 weeks ago. But watching Trevor Hammond slide a platinum band onto Amber Rodriguez's finger while promising to love and cherish her forever felt surreal in a way that legal paperwork never could. "I do," Trevor said, his voice carrying across the church. Simone smiled. Not a bitter smile or a sad one, but a genuine, serene smile that touched her dark brown eyes and made her beautiful face glow. The smile of someone who knew something no one else in the room knew. Several guests had noticed her arrival. Whispers rippled through the pews like wind through wheat. She saw heads turn, heard the sharp intake of breath from Trevor's mother in the third row. But Simone didn't look away from the ceremony. She watched with the calm attention of someone observing a play they'd already seen. Beside her, Richard Chin, her attorney, sat quietly with a leather briefcase at his feet. He'd offered to wait outside, but Simone had insisted he accompany her. His presence was part of the statement she was making. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant declared. "You may kiss the bride." Trevor pulled Amber close and kissed her. The guests applauded. Amber's white dress, Simone noted, had probably cost about $15,000. She knew because she'd paid for it, even if Amber didn't realize that yet. Every flower in this church, every candle, every note of music from the string quartet, all of it purchased with money Trevor had stolen from Simone over the past 18 months. As the newly married couple turned to walk down the aisle, Trevor's eyes found Simone's. His face went absolutely white. His step faltered, and Amber had to steady him, looking confused. Simone gave him a small, gracious nod, the kind you'd give an old acquaintance at a social gathering. Trevor looked like he might be sick. The wedding party processed down the aisle, bridesmaids in blush pink dresses, groomsmen in expensive gray suits. When Trevor and Amber reached the back of the church, they had to pass within feet of where Simone stood. Amber finally saw her and her eyes widened with recognition. She'd seen photos, Simone assumed. "Congratulations," Simone said warmly, her voice clear and genuine. "I wish you both all the happiness you deserve." The emphasis on the word deserve was so slight that only Trevor caught it. His hand tightened on Amber's, and sweat beaded on his upper lip despite the cool temperature in the church. Then they were past, heading out to the waiting limousine and the reception at the country club. Guests filed out, many stealing glances at Simone. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked scandalized that she dared to show her face. Trevor's best friend, Kyle, stopped and glared at her with open hostility. "You've got some nerve," he muttered. Simone just smiled. "It's a free country. Churches are open to everyone." Richard stood, and his presence, tall, professional, radiating quiet legal authority, made Kyle think better of whatever he'd been about to say. He stormed off instead. As the church emptied, Simone remained standing in the back, looking at the flowers and decorations. White roses and hydrangeas, exactly like the ones from her own wedding to Trevor 8 years ago. He'd recycled even that. "Are you sure about the reception?" Richard asked quietly. "Absolutely," Simone replied. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." What no one in that church knew, what Trevor was only beginning to suspect as fear turned his insides to ice, was that Simone Lawrence hadn't come to the wedding to make a scene or beg him to come back or cry over what she'd lost. She'd come to watch the final moments of Trevor Hammond's freedom. 3 months ago, Simone's entire world had shattered in the space of a single evening. She'd been married to Trevor for 8 years, together for 10, and thought she knew everything about him. They'd met at a tech conference in Austin. She was a data analyst for a healthcare software company. He was a rising star in commercial real estate development. They'd clicked immediately, and their courtship had been a whirlwind of romantic dinners, weekend getaways, and long talks about building a life together. They'd bought a beautiful house in a good neighborhood. They talked about having children someday, when Trevor's business was more established. Simone had supported his career, even taking a step back from her own when his work demanded more of their time. She'd hosted dinners for his clients, attended industry events, played the role of the supportive wife while maintaining her own career. She trusted him completely. That trust died on a Tuesday in September when she was reviewing their credit card statement and saw a charge that didn't make sense. $5,000 at a high-end jeweler in the downtown shopping district. They hadn't discussed buying any jewelry. Their anniversary wasn't for months. When Trevor came home that night, she'd asked him about it casually, expecting a simple explanation. Maybe a gift for his mother or a business associate. The panic that flashed across his face was quick, but Simone caught it. She'd spent 10 years reading data, spotting anomalies, finding patterns in chaos. She knew how to see what people tried to hide. "Oh, that," Trevor had said, recovering his smile. "It's a surprise for you actually. Early anniversary gift. Don't spoil it by asking questions." But there was no gift. Simone knew it in her gut. Something was very wrong. That night, while Trevor slept, she'd started looking deeper. What she found had demolished everything she believed about her life, her marriage, and the man she'd loved. Now, standing in the church where he'd just married another woman, Simone thought about that night and all the nights that followed. The discovery, the rage, the grief, the fear, and finally, the cold, calculated planning that had brought her to this moment. "Shall we head to the reception?" Richard asked, picking up his briefcase. Simone smoothed down her white suit jacket and checked her reflection in one of the church's decorative mirrors. She looked powerful and completely in control, which was exactly how she felt. "Yes," she said. "Let's go watch Trevor enjoy his wedding reception. It's going to be his last party for a very long time." They walked out of Sacred Heart Church into the fading sunlight. Simone's car, a sleek new sedan she'd purchased just last week, waited at the curb. As they drove toward the country club, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Special Agent Morrison at the FBI. "Everything is in place. Timing confirmed for tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Thank you for your cooperation in this investigation." Simone read the message and deleted it. Then she checked her makeup in the mirror and prepared to attend her ex-husband's wedding reception with a smile that would haunt him for the rest of his life. 3 months earlier, Simone had sat at their kitchen table with her laptop open and her heart pounding so hard she thought she might pass out. The credit card statement glowed on the screen, but she was looking at something else now. Something much worse. Their bank accounts. She'd logged into their joint checking account first, the one they used for household expenses. The balance was much lower than she'd expected. Not dramatically low, but enough to be noticeable. $5,000 less than it should have been. Frowning, she checked their savings account. Another discrepancy. This one was larger. Nearly $20,000 had been transferred out over the past 6 months in increments small enough that she hadn't noticed on casual review. Her hands shook as she opened their investment account statements. This was where they kept the bulk of their savings, the nest egg they'd built together over years of careful planning and budgeting. The account that was supposed to fund their future, their retirement, maybe a child's college education someday. Half of it was gone. $200,000, transferred out over the course of the past year in carefully spaced withdrawals that wouldn't trigger automatic alerts. Some went to accounts she didn't recognize. Others were marked as investment opportunities in companies she'd never heard of. Simone felt like the floor had opened beneath her chair. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't Trevor making a few bad investments without telling her. This was systematic, deliberate, hidden. This was theft. She sat back, trying to breathe, trying to think. The logical part of her brain, the part that had made her excellent at her job analyzing healthcare data patterns, kicked into gear. If Trevor was hiding money transfers, what else was he hiding? She checked their mortgage account. Their house was in both their names, or it was supposed to be. They'd bought it together 5 years ago, both of them on the deed, both responsible for the payments. But when she pulled up the property records through the county website, only Trevor's name appeared on the current deed. Simone's breath caught. That wasn't possible. She hadn't signed anything to remove herself from the house title. She would have remembered that. It would have required notarization, legal documentation. Unless someone had forged her signature. Her phone buzzed. A text from Trevor, "Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Love you." She stared at the message. How many times had she received texts like this over the past year? How many late nights, weekend business trips, urgent meetings? She'd never questioned it. Trevor's real estate development business required long hours and unpredictable schedule. She'd understood that from the beginning. Or had she just been convenient? Easy to fool? Something inside Simone hardened. She texted back, "Okay. Be safe." Then she spent the next 4 hours digging through every financial record she could access. What she found was worse than she'd imagined. Trevor had been systematically moving their assets for at least 18 months. Money from their joint accounts went to personal accounts in only his name. Investment portfolios were liquidated and reinvested in ventures that benefited only him. He'd taken out a second mortgage on their house without her knowledge, using more forged signatures and drained that money into offshore accounts. The $5,000 jewelry charge wasn't the only recent purchase at high-end stores. There were dozens of charges over the past 6 months. Designer clothes, expensive restaurants, a weekend at a luxury resort in the mountains. All charges Simone had never seen the benefits of, because they weren't for her. At midnight, Trevor still wasn't home. Simone made a decision that would change everything. She got in her car and drove to his office building downtown. The parking garage was mostly empty at this hour, but Trevor's Mercedes was there on the executive level. She parked several spaces away and waited. At 12:47 a.m., Trevor exited the building. He wasn't alone. A woman walked beside him, laughing at something he'd said. She was younger than Simone, maybe early 30s, with long dark hair and a curvy figure shown off by a tight red dress. She looked nothing like Simone, who was taller and more athletic, with close-cropped natural hair and a preference for professional but understated clothing. Simone watched as Trevor opened the passenger door of his Mercedes for the woman. She kissed him before getting in. Not a friendly kiss. A passionate, intimate kiss that spoke of familiarity and comfort. Simone sat frozen in her car, watching them drive away together. She should have felt devastated. She should have cried or screamed or chased after them. Instead, she felt a cold clarity settle over her like ice water. This explained everything. The money, the lies, the late nights. Trevor was planning a new life, and he was funding it by stealing from their shared one. He was going to leave her with nothing while he rode off into the sunset with his mistress on money he'd embezzled from their marriage. Simone started her car and drove home. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she opened a new document on her laptop and started making a plan. By dawn, she had a clear outline. First, she needed more information. Second, she needed to protect what little she had left. Third, she needed to document everything carefully and legally. And fourth, she needed help from professionals who knew how to handle situations like this. When Trevor came home at 7 a.m., looking rumpled and satisfied, Simone was making coffee in the kitchen. She smiled at him like she did every morning. "Good morning," she said warmly. "How was your meeting?" "Long," Trevor said, not quite meeting her eyes. "I'm exhausted. I think I'll take a quick shower and then head to bed for a few hours." "Of course," Simone replied. "You work so hard." He kissed her cheek and headed upstairs. Simone listened to the shower run and thought about the woman in the red dress. She wondered if Trevor had showered at her place too, or if he was washing away evidence before coming home. It didn't matter. What mattered was that Simone now knew the truth, and Trevor had no idea that she knew. That gave her the advantage. Over the next 2 weeks, Simone became a detective in her own life. She hired a private investigator, a gruff ex-cop named Frank Delgado who came highly recommended by a colleague at work whose sister had gone through a difficult divorce. "You want me to follow your husband?" Frank had asked during their first meeting in his cramped office. "Investors. He's been siphoning money from the company accounts, disguising it as legitimate business expenses and investment opportunities." "How much?" Simone asked. "From the company?" "At least $1.2 million over the past 2 years." "From your joint assets?" "Another $400,000. He's moved most of it to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Belize, plus he's purchased property in Florida and Nevada under shell company names." Simone felt sick. "That's over $1.5 million. "That we can prove so far," Patricia corrected. "There may be more we haven't found yet. The good news is that he's left a clear paper trail. He's smart enough to hide the money but not smart enough to hide the fact that it was stolen." Richard leaned forward. "Simone, I need to tell you something else we discovered. Amber is pregnant." The words hit Simone like a physical blow. She'd prepared herself for a lot of revelations but not that one. "How far along?" she managed to ask. "About 3 months, Richard said gently. "I'm sorry. I know this is hard." Hard didn't begin to cover it. Simone sat there trying to process what this meant. Trevor had gotten another woman pregnant while still married to her. While still sleeping in their bed and eating meals at their table and pretending to be her husband. "That's why he's been moving money so aggressively," Patricia said. "He's preparing to leave you, marry Amber, and start a family. He needs liquid capital to fund that new life quickly." "How long do we wait?" Simone asked, her voice surprisingly steady. Richard exchanged a glance with Patricia. "That depends on when he files for divorce. Based on the timeline, I guess he'll do it soon. Amber's probably pressuring him. Once he files, we file our countersuit and present all of our evidence. The forgery, the embezzlement, the hidden accounts, all of it." "What happens to him?" Simone asked. "Criminally?" If we report the fraud to the authorities and they pursue it, he could face serious prison time. Civil? He'll have to return everything he stole, plus penalties. His career will be destroyed. His reputation will be ruined. And you'll get everything you're legally entitled to in the divorce settlement. Simone thought about that. Trevor in prison. His fancy cars sold to pay restitution. His affair partner realizing the man she'd chosen was a criminal. Everything he'd worked for gone. Good, she said quietly. That night, Trevor came home and announced he needed to talk to her. They sat in the living room, the same living room where they'd celebrated anniversaries and Christmas mornings and lazy Sunday afternoons. The room looked the same, but everything felt different now. Simone, I don't know how to say this, Trevor began. He looked nervous, fidgeting with his wedding ring. The ring he'd be taking off soon to give to someone else. I haven't been happy for a while. I think we've grown apart. I think we want different things. Simone forced herself to look surprised and hurt. What are you saying? I think we should separate, Trevor said. He wouldn't look at her. Maybe we rushed into marriage. Maybe we're just not compatible anymore. I've been thinking about this for months, and I think it's best for both of us if we end things now before we waste more time. It took everything Simone had not to throw her water glass at his lying face. Instead, she let her eyes fill with tears. Is there someone else? No, Trevor said quickly. Too quickly. This isn't about anyone else. It's about us. We're not working anymore. Simone let the silence stretch out. Then she wiped her eyes and nodded. Okay. Trevor blinked. Okay. If that's what you want, then okay, Simone said. I won't fight you. I just want this to be civil and fair. Relief flooded Trevor's face. He'd probably expected tears, arguments, begging. Getting easy agreement must have seemed like a gift. I'll have my lawyer draw up papers, he said. I'll be fair, Simone. I promise. The house is mostly in my name anyway because of the business, but I'll make sure you get something for your half. And we can split the savings account 50-50. The savings account that he'd already drained by half. The house that he'd illegally transferred into only his name. His idea of fair was laughable. That sounds reasonable, Simone said softly. Trevor actually looked guilty for a moment. You're being really mature about this. I appreciate that. Simone smiled at him. I just want you to be happy, Trevor. 3 days later, Simone was served with divorce papers. Trevor's lawyer was offering her exactly what he'd promised. 50% of what remained in the depleted savings account, no claim to the house, no alimony, and no stake in his business. The total settlement was less than $80,000. From a marriage worth well over $1 million in combined assets. Richard read through the papers and laughed. He actually thinks you're going to sign this? I'm going to sign it, Simone said. What? No, absolutely not. We need to counteroffer and... I'm going to sign it, Simone repeated. Without any changes. I'm going to give Trevor exactly what he wants. Richard stared at her. Then understanding dawned on his face. You want him to think he's won. I want him to think I'm too heartbroken and stupid to fight back, Simone confirmed. I want him to believe he got away with everything. Because then he'll get comfortable. He'll marry Amber, have his baby, live his new life. And he won't see what's coming. Patricia, who was also at the meeting, grinned. I like the way you think. Simone signed the divorce papers without any modifications. Trevor's lawyer seemed surprised, but processed everything quickly. The divorce was finalized in record time, just 6 weeks after Trevor had filed. On the day the divorce became official, Trevor moved out of their house. Simone watched from the window as he loaded boxes into his Mercedes. Amber was there, helping him, her pregnant belly just starting to show under a loose blouse. They looked happy. Relieved. Like they'd gotten away with something. Trevor came back inside one last time to return his house key. I hope we can be friends someday, he said awkwardly. I hope you get everything you deserve, Simone replied. After he left, she sat in the empty house, the house she no longer legally owned, and called Richard. He's gone, she said. We can move forward. Are you ready for what comes next? Richard asked. Simone looked around at the home she'd decorated, the life she'd built, the years she'd invested in a man who'd betrayed her without hesitation. She thought about the evidence they'd gathered, the case they'd built, the justice that was coming. More than ready, she said. 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Trevor and Amber sent out wedding invitations. They were getting married at Sacred Heart Church, the same place Trevor and Simone had exchanged vows 8 years ago. The reception would be at the country club where they'd celebrated their 5th anniversary. The audacity was breathtaking. When Simone's invitation arrived in the mail, sent to her new apartment, because she'd had to move out of the house Trevor stole, she stared at the elegant cardstock and laughed until tears ran down her face. Frank called that night with his final surveillance report. Wedding is set for Saturday at 3 p.m. I've documented everything you asked for. Every stolen penny is accounted for. The FBI is ready to move when you give the word. The FBI? Simone asked. Interstate wire fraud, embezzlement from a corporation with federal contracts, tax evasion? This stopped being just a civil case a while ago, Frank explained. Special Agent Morrison has been building a criminal case alongside your civil one. Once Richard files your countersuit and Patricia's forensic report becomes part of the public record, the feds will have everything they need to arrest Trevor. When? Simone asked. That's up to you, Frank said. But if I were in your shoes, I'd let Trevor have his perfect wedding day. Let him think he won. And then let him wake up the next morning to federal agents knocking on his door. Simone thought about that. Trevor, waking up in his honeymoon suite with his new bride, probably already planning how to spend the money he'd stolen. The shock on his face when the FBI arrived. The moment he realized he hadn't gotten away with anything. That's exactly what we'll do, Simone said. She called Richard next. File everything Monday morning. The countersuit, Patricia's forensic accounting report, all the evidence of fraud and forgery. Make it public record. That'll trigger the criminal investigation immediately, Richard warned. Good, Simone said. And Richard? I want to go to the wedding. There was a long pause. Are you sure that's wise? I want Trevor to see me there, Simone said. I want him to see me watching him marry her with stolen money in a ceremony paid for with funds he embezzled from our marriage. I want him to know that I know, and I want him to spend his wedding night terrified of what's coming. Richard laughed. You're terrifying. I mean that as a compliment. Thank you, Simone said. See you Saturday. Wear your best suit. While Trevor planned his wedding, Simone spent her days working with Patricia to build an irrefutable case. They met in Patricia's office, a small space filled with filing cabinets and computer monitors, where the forensic accountant had assembled a financial timeline that told the complete story of Trevor's fraud. I want to show you something, Patricia said, pulling up a spreadsheet on her screen. This is every transaction Trevor made from your joint accounts over the past 18 months. Watch what happens when I overlay it with his meetings with Amber. She clicked a button, and red dots appeared on the timeline, each one representing a date when Frank's surveillance had confirmed Trevor was with Amber. Every red dot aligned almost perfectly with a major financial transaction. He took her on a Caribbean vacation in March, Patricia said, pointing to a cluster of charges. He paid for it by transferring $15,000 from your joint savings, moving it through 2 intermediary accounts to obscure the source, then using it to book the flights and hotel under a shell company name. She scrolled down. In May he bought her a diamond bracelet. $8,000, funded by liquidating stocks from your joint investment portfolio. In July he put a down payment on a condo in Florida, $300,000 financed by a second mortgage on your house that he took out using forged signatures. Each revelation made Simone's jaw tighten, but she'd moved past shock weeks ago. Now she just wanted to see the full scope of what he'd done. The pattern is consistent, Patricia continued. Every major expense related to his affair was funded by stealing from you. The engagement ring he bought Amber? That came from closing out a retirement account you'd been contributing to for 6 years. The wedding they're planning? Paid for with money he embezzled from his own company, which he was planning to blame on accounting errors. Can we prove all of this? Simone asked. Every single transaction, Patricia confirmed. He left a digital trail a mile wide. Bank records, wire transfers, forged documents, all of it time-stamped and traceable. And here's the best part. She pulled up another document. Trevor's company, Hammond Development Corporation, has been bidding on federal contracts for medical facility construction. That means his embezzlement from the company isn't just a civil matter. The FBI has jurisdiction because he defrauded a company doing business with the federal government. What does that mean for him? Simone asked. Federal prison, Patricia said simply. Wire fraud carries up to 20 years. Add in the tax evasion from not reporting the stolen money as income, the forgery charges from the property documents, and the embezzlement from a federally contracted company, and he's looking at serious time. Simone absorbed this. 20 years. Trevor would be in his 60s when he got out if he served the full sentence. His child with Amber would be an adult. His career would be destroyed. Everything he'd worked for gone. I know that sounds harsh, Patricia said gently. But what he did to you, stealing your money, forging your signature, destroying your financial security while pretending to be your loving husband, that's harsh too. He made his choices. I'm not having second thoughts, Simone said. I just want to make sure we do this right. I want him to face real consequences. He will, Patricia promised. That week, Simone received another shock. Her father called from the assisted living facility where he'd moved after her mother died 3 years ago. Simone, honey, I need to talk to you about something, Jerome Lawrence said. He sounded worried. Did Trevor ever invest that money for me? Simone's heart sank. What money, Dad? The inheritance from your mother's estate, Jerome explained. About $50,000. Trevor said he could invest it in one of his real estate deals, get me a good return. He was so enthusiastic about it, and I don't understand all that financial stuff. I signed the papers he brought over and wrote him a check. That was about a year ago, but I haven't seen any statements or returns. Every time I ask, he says the project is still in development. Simone closed her eyes. Of course Trevor had stolen from her father too. Of course he'd taken advantage of an elderly widower's trust. Dad, I need you to find those papers Trevor had you sign, Simone said carefully. Can you do that? Sure, honey. They're in my filing cabinet. What? Is something wrong? Just find them and hold on to them. I'm going to come visit this weekend, okay? When Simone hung up, she immediately called Richard and told him about her father's money. That son of a bitch, Richard said, anger clear in his voice. Defrauding the elderly adds another charge. I'll add it to the civil suit, and the FBI will want to know about it too. Simone drove to her father's assisted living facility that Saturday. Jerome had the papers ready, and Simone's hands shook as she read through them. Trevor had convinced her father to invest in a commercial development opportunity that didn't exist. The check had been deposited into one of Trevor's shell company accounts and never invested in anything legitimate. Did I do something wrong? Jerome asked, seeing his daughter's face. No, Dad, Simone said, hugging him. You trusted someone you thought was family. Trevor's the one who did something wrong. But I promise you we're going to get your money back. She showed the documents to Patricia, who added them to the growing mountain of evidence. This is actually helpful, Patricia said. Elder fraud is taken very seriously. It'll strengthen the criminal case and probably increase the sentence if he's convicted. Good, Simone said. She thought about her gentle father, who'd worked hard his whole life and saved carefully to leave something for his family. Trevor had stolen from him without hesitation, probably laughing about how easy it was to manipulate an old man. The rage that Simone had been controlling so carefully flared hot and bright. She channeled it into focus. Every meeting with Richard, every document reviewed with Patricia, every update from Frank's surveillance, it all became fuel for the case they were building. A week before the wedding, Richard called her with an update. I've coordinated with Special Agent Morrison at the FBI. They've been running a parallel investigation based on the evidence we've provided. They're ready to move the Monday after Trevor's wedding. What will happen? Simone asked. Federal agents will arrest him, probably at his home or wherever he's staying. They'll execute search warrants for his office, his vehicles, his electronics. He'll be charged and arraigned, and unless he makes bail, which will be high given the flight risk and hidden offshore accounts, he'll sit in jail until trial. How long until trial? 6 months to a year, typically. But Simone, you need to understand something. Once this becomes a criminal case, it's out of your hands. The federal prosecutors will handle it. You'll be a witness, not a plaintiff. That's fine, Simone said. As long as he faces justice, I don't need to be the one holding the gavel. There's one more thing, Richard said. We need to think about Amber. She's going to be caught in the middle of this. Pregnant, newly married to a man who's about to be arrested. The life she thought she was getting is going to explode. Simone thought about the woman in the red dress, laughing with Trevor in the parking garage. The woman who'd knowingly started an affair with a married man. Part of her felt no sympathy. But another part, the part that understood what it was like to have your life built on lies, felt something complicated. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement that Amber was also a victim of Trevor's deception, even if she'd helped create it. That's not my problem, Simone said finally. She made her choices. She's going to live with the consequences just like Trevor is. Fair enough, Richard said. The days leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of final preparations. Simone bought her white suit, a bold choice that she knew would make a statement. She had her hair styled professionally and chose her best jewelry. She wanted to look powerful, successful, and unbothered. The night before the wedding she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The discovery, the investigation, the secret planning. The fake smiles and pretend conversations with Trevor while knowing exactly what he was doing. Tomorrow she would sit in a church and watch him marry someone else. The man she'd loved for 10 years would promise forever to another woman, using words he'd once said to Simone. And she would smile and congratulate them, knowing that everything they thought they'd won was about to be ripped away. It should have felt bitter. It should have hurt. Instead, Simone felt a fierce satisfaction. Trevor thought he'd gotten away with everything. He thought he was clever and careful and that Simone was too heartbroken to fight back. He was about to learn how wrong he was. She finally fell asleep around 3 a.m., and when she woke up at 8, she felt calm and focused. Today was the beginning of Trevor's end. And Simone was going to be there to watch it happen. While Trevor and Amber planned their wedding with money that didn't belong to them, Simone was building something entirely different. A new life that was completely her own. The divorce settlement Trevor had offered, and that Simone had strategically accepted, left her with less than $80,000. Not enough to buy a house in their expensive neighborhood, not enough to maintain the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to, but enough to start fresh. She'd moved into a smaller apartment in a different part of the city. It was on the 3rd floor of a renovated historic building with hardwood floors, tall windows, and exposed brick walls. The space was about a quarter of the size of the house she'd shared with Trevor, but it was entirely hers. No memories of Trevor haunted these rooms. No lies had been told across this kitchen table. No betrayals had happened in this bedroom. Simone had furnished it simply but beautifully, using money from her own savings that Trevor hadn't touched. A comfortable gray couch, a small dining table, a bed with crisp white linens. She'd hung her own artwork, colorful abstract paintings she'd collected over the years, and filled the windowsills with plants. The apartment felt like a sanctuary. Work had become both a distraction and a salvation. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Simone's boss at the healthcare software company had called her into his office. "Simone, I've been watching your work for years," Gerald Martinez had said. "You're one of our best data analysts. Your attention to detail is exceptional, and your ability to spot patterns and anomalies is exactly what we need at the senior level." "Thank you," Simone had said, wondering where this was going. "We're creating a new position, Director of Data Analytics and Fraud Detection. It's a significant promotion with a substantial raise. I'd like to offer it to you." The timing couldn't have been more perfect. The position came with a 40% salary increase, better benefits, and the opportunity to lead a team. Simone had accepted immediately. Her new role involved analyzing healthcare billing data to identify fraud patterns, insurance scams, inflated charges, false claims. It turned out that her months of investigating Trevor's financial crimes had given her a skill set perfectly suited to the job. "You have a gift for this," her new team member, Sophie Chin, told her after Simone identified a complex billing fraud scheme their first week. "How do you see these patterns so quickly?" "Practice," Simone had replied, thinking about all those nights tracking Trevor's money through shell companies and offshore accounts. "I've learned a lot about how people hide what they're doing wrong." The raise meant Simone could afford her new apartment comfortably and start rebuilding her savings. She opened new bank accounts in only her name, started a retirement fund that only she could access, and began planning for a financial future where she was the only person in control. But money wasn't the only thing Simone was rebuilding. She'd realized during her marriage that Trevor had slowly isolated her from friends and activities she'd enjoyed. It had been subtle. He'd complain when she wanted to go out with colleagues, schedule his work events on nights she'd planned to see friends, express disapproval of her hobbies in small ways that accumulated over time. Now Simone was reclaiming all of it. She joined a book club that met every other Thursday at a coffee shop near her apartment. She started taking a painting class on Saturday mornings. She reconnected with college friends she'd lost touch with, meeting them for brunch and actually enjoying conversations that didn't revolve around Trevor's career or needs. "It's so good to see you," her friend Denise had said over mimosas one Sunday. "You seem different. More yourself." "I feel more myself," Simone had admitted. "I didn't realize how much I'd disappeared into my marriage until it was over." Denise, who'd never particularly liked Trevor, had raised her glass. To new beginnings and getting rid of dead weight. They'd toasted to that, and Simone had felt genuinely happy for the first time in months. But beneath the new life she was building, the case against Trevor was moving forward with precision and speed. Richard had coordinated everything carefully. The civil countersuit would be filed the Monday after Trevor's wedding. It would detail every penny Trevor had stolen, every forged document, every fraudulent transfer. Patricia's forensic accounting report would be attached as evidence, along with Frank's surveillance documentation and copies of all the relevant financial records. The filing would become public record immediately. Trevor's business associates would see it. His investors would see it. The media would likely pick it up, given the amounts involved and the salacious details of the affair. And once the civil case was public, the federal criminal case would be triggered. Special Agent Jennifer Morrison had been working with the FBI's white-collar crime division for 15 years. She was thorough, professional, and according to Richard, absolutely committed to prosecuting financial fraud cases. Agent Morrison wants to meet with you before we move forward, Richard had told Simone 3 weeks before the wedding. She needs to go over the evidence and prepare you for what happens next. The meeting took place in a federal building downtown, in a conference room that was all fluorescent lights and bland government furniture. Agent Morrison was a woman in her mid-40s with short blonde hair and sharp blue eyes that assessed Simone carefully. "Mrs. Hammond," she'd said, shaking Simone's hand. "Miss Lawrence actually," Simone had corrected. "I've gone back to my maiden name." "Miss Lawrence then. I want to thank you for bringing this case to our attention. The evidence you and your legal team have compiled is some of the most thorough documentation I've seen in a civilian fraud case. I'm a data analyst," Simone had said. "I know how to build a case from evidence." Agent Morrison had smiled slightly. "That's clear. Let me walk you through what's going to happen. Once your civil suit is filed and becomes public record, my team will execute search warrants for Trevor Hammond's home, office, and all known properties. We'll seize his computers, phones, and financial records. We'll freeze all accounts we can identify as containing proceeds from the fraud." "What about the offshore accounts?" Simone had asked. "Those are trickier, but we have international cooperation agreements. The Cayman Islands account will likely be frozen within days. Belize takes longer, but we'll get there. He won't be able to access any of that money." "When will he be arrested?" "We'll arrest him the morning after your civil suit is filed. I want to give him just enough time to see the lawsuit and realize his world is collapsing before we take him into custody. Maximum psychological impact." Simone had appreciated that detail. Trevor deserved to know what was coming, deserved those hours of fear before the handcuffs closed. "He'll be charged with wire fraud, tax evasion, embezzlement, and forgery," Agent Morrison had continued. "Possibly additional charges depending on what we find during the search warrants. He'll be arraigned and we'll argue for high bail given the flight risk and hidden assets. If convicted, he's looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison." 20 years. The number still stunned Simone every time she heard it. "What about Amber Rodriguez?" Simone had asked. "Trevor's fiancée. She's pregnant with his child." Agent Morrison had consulted her notes. "We've investigated her involvement. From what we can determine, she didn't know about the fraud. She believed Trevor was wealthy and successful on his own merits. She'll be interviewed as part of the investigation, but unless we find evidence she knowingly participated, she won't face charges." Simone had nodded. She'd expected as much. Amber was many things. A woman who'd slept with a married man, someone with questionable morals, but probably not a criminal. "She's going to have a very difficult time," Agent Morrison had said. "Married to a federal inmate, pregnant, her life exposed in the media. That's not your fault, but I want you to be prepared for people to blame you." "Let them," Simone had replied. Now, sitting in her apartment the night before Trevor's wedding, Simone reviewed everything one final time. The civil suit was ready to be filed Monday morning at 9 a.m. Agent Morrison's team was prepared to execute search warrants and make the arrest Monday at 7 a.m. The timing was perfect. Trevor would have his wedding day. He'd marry Amber, celebrate with friends and family, probably sleep satisfied that night thinking he'd gotten away with everything. And then he'd wake up to federal agents at his door. Simone's phone rang. It was Richard. "I want to make absolutely sure you're ready for tomorrow," he said. "Attending Trevor's wedding isn't required for our case. You don't have to put yourself through that." "I know," Simone said. "But I want to be there. I want to see him one last time before his life falls apart. I want him to know that I know, and that I'm not some broken victim crying over what I lost. I rebuilt. I'm stronger. And he's about to lose everything." "Okay," Richard said. "I'll pick you up at 2 p.m. Wear that white suit. Make a statement." After they hung up, Simone stood at her window looking out over the city lights. Somewhere out there, Trevor was probably having his bachelor party or finalizing wedding details or sleeping peacefully next to Amber, dreaming about their future. He had no idea that future was about to be cancelled. Simone thought about the woman she'd been 8 years ago, the one who'd walked down the aisle toward Trevor with love and hope in her heart. That woman had trusted completely, believed in forever, thought she'd found her partner for life. That woman was gone. In her place was someone harder, wiser, and infinitely stronger. Someone who knew that the best revenge wasn't anger or bitterness or trying to hurt people who'd hurt you. The best revenge was building a life so good that the people who'd wronged you became irrelevant. And then, if justice happened to catch up with them, you watched it happen from the comfortable distance of your own happiness. Tomorrow, Simone would watch Trevor make promises he didn't deserve to keep. She'd smile and congratulate them and walk away. And then justice would come knocking. Simone went to bed early and slept peacefully, dreamlessly, the sleep of someone with a clear conscience and a score about to be settled. Simone woke up at 9 a.m. on Trevor's wedding day feeling calm and focused. She made coffee, ate a simple breakfast, and went through her morning routine with careful attention. This day required her to be at her absolute best, composed, beautiful, and completely in control. She started with a long shower, then spent an hour on her hair and makeup. Her natural hair was styled in elegant curls that framed her face. Her makeup was subtle but flawless, smooth foundation that made her dark skin glow, perfectly defined eyes, and a bold lip color that said she was confident and unbothered. The white suit fit perfectly. She'd had it tailored specifically for this occasion. The blazer was structured but feminine, the pants cut to elongate her legs, and she paired it with a silk blouse in pale blue and classic black heels. She looked like she was attending a business meeting or a power lunch, not her ex-husband's wedding. That was exactly the point. Richard arrived at 2 p.m. sharp. He was wearing a dark gray suit and carried his leather briefcase, looking every inch the successful attorney. "You look incredible," he said when Simone opened her apartment door. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" "Completely ready," Simone replied. She grabbed her small clutch purse and locked her apartment behind her. The drive to Sacred Heart Church took 20 minutes. They spent most of it in comfortable silence. When they were a few blocks away, Richard finally spoke. "Everything is in place for Monday. The filing is prepared, Agent Morrison's team is ready. After tomorrow, Trevor Hammond's life as he knows it ends." "Good," Simone said simply. They pulled into the church parking lot at 2:45, 15 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to start. The lot was already full of expensive cars. Trevor's friends and business associates always did like to show off their wealth. Simone and Richard walked up the stone steps to the church entrance. The doors were open and soft music drifted out. Inside, guests were filing into pews, talking quietly among themselves. The moment Simone stepped inside, heads turned. She heard gasps, saw shocked expressions, felt the wave of whispers spread through the sanctuary. She kept her head high and her expression serene. Richard stayed close beside her, a silent but powerful presence. They walked down the side aisle toward the back pews. Simone had no intention of sitting close to the front. This wasn't about making a scene or causing drama. It was about being seen, about making a statement. She chose a seat in the very last row on the bride's side. Close enough to see everything, far enough away to make it clear she wasn't here to interfere. An older woman Simone didn't recognize leaned over from the row in front. "Excuse me, but this is a private wedding. Are you sure you're on the guest list?" "I received an invitation," Simone replied pleasantly, which was technically true. She just hadn't RSVP'd. The woman looked uncertain but turned away. The whispers continued, spreading through the church like ripples in water. Simone heard her name, heard people speculating about why she was here, heard everything from sympathy to judgment. She ignored all of it. At 3 p.m. exactly, the music changed. The wedding party began to process down the aisle. Bridesmaids in blush pink dresses, groomsmen in gray suits. Trevor's best friend Kyle shot Simone a glare as he passed, but she just smiled back at him. Then came Trevor, walking from the side with the officiant. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, his dark hair styled perfectly, his face lit up with anticipation as he watched the back of the church for his bride. His eyes swept over the assembled guests, and then they landed on Simone. The color drained from his face. His smile faltered. For a moment he looked like he might actually faint. Simone gave him a small, gracious nod. The kind of acknowledgement you'd give an old acquaintance. Trevor's hands clenched at his sides. Sweat appeared on his forehead. He glanced at Kyle, then at the officiant, then back at Simone, clearly trying to figure out what to do. But what could he do? Cause a scene at his own wedding? Have her removed? That would raise questions he couldn't answer. So he stood there, trapped, while the music swelled and Amber appeared at the back of the church in her expensive white dress. Amber looked beautiful. Her dark hair was styled in elaborate curls, her makeup perfect, her dress a confection of lace and silk. Her pregnant belly was just visible under the flowing fabric. She beamed as she walked down the aisle on her father's arm. She didn't see Simone until she was almost to the front. When she did, her steps faltered. Her smile froze. Her father whispered something to her and she recovered, but her eyes kept darting back to where Simone sat calmly in the last row. The ceremony began. The officiant spoke about love and commitment and partnership. Simone listened to words that sounded so familiar, so similar to the ones spoken at her own wedding in this same church 8 years ago. Trevor had promised her forever. He'd looked into her eyes and vowed to love her, to cherish her, to be faithful in good times and bad. He'd broken every single promise. Now he was making those same promises to someone else, and Simone wondered how long it would take before he broke these too. If he wasn't about to spend the next 15 years in federal prison, that is. The vows came. Trevor's voice shook slightly as he repeated after the officiant. I, Trevor, take you, Amber, to be my lawfully wedded wife. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part. Richer or poorer. That was about to become very literal very soon. Amber said her vows with more confidence, her voice clear and happy. She clearly believed this was the beginning of her fairy tale. Simone almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the officiant said. You may kiss the bride. Trevor kissed Amber and the guests applauded. But the kiss was brief, distracted. Trevor's eyes kept flickering to the back of the church where Simone sat with that mysterious, knowing smile. As the newly married couple turned to walk back down the aisle, Trevor had to pass right by Simone's row. His hand gripped Amber's tightly, his knuckles white. Simone stood as they approached. Before Trevor could hurry past, she stepped into the aisle. Congratulations, she said warmly, extending her hand to Amber. I wish you both all the happiness you deserve. Amber looked stunned but automatically took Simone's hand. Thank you. Oh, we didn't expect you to come. I wouldn't have missed it, Simone replied. She turned to Trevor, whose face had gone from pale to flushed. Trevor, congratulations on your marriage. I hope it lasts. The subtle emphasis on the word hope made Trevor flinch. He knew. He couldn't prove it, couldn't pinpoint exactly what Simone knew or what she was planning, but he knew something was very wrong. Simone, he managed to say, this is unexpected. Life is full of surprises, Simone said pleasantly. She stepped back to let them pass. Enjoy your reception. They walked past, Amber looking confused, Trevor looking terrified. The rest of the wedding party followed, and then the guests began to file out. Richard appeared at Simone's elbow. That was beautiful. Terrifying but beautiful. His face was priceless. Ready for the reception? Simone asked. Are we really going to that too? Just for a few minutes, Simone said. I want to make sure Trevor knows I'm not hiding or crying or broken. I'm here, I'm strong, and I'm not afraid of him. They drove to the country club separately from the main procession. The reception hall was decorated lavishly with flowers and candles, white and blush pink everywhere. A live band was setting up. The bar was already serving champagne. Simone and Richard arrived just as the receiving line was forming. Guests were queuing up to congratulate the bride and groom. Simone joined the line. When she reached Trevor and Amber, she shook hands with both of them again. Beautiful ceremony, she told Amber. And this venue is stunning. Thank you, Amber said uncertainly. She clearly didn't know how to handle the presence of Trevor's ex-wife at her wedding. Simone leaned in slightly and lowered her voice so only Amber could hear. I mean it. I hope you get everything you're expecting from this marriage. Really, I do. Amber's eyes widened slightly, trying to figure out if there was a hidden meaning in those words. There wasn't, not really. Simone genuinely did hope Amber got what she expected, which was probably a wealthy husband and a comfortable life. What she was actually going to get was a federal inmate and a very public scandal, but that wasn't Simone's fault. She moved on before Amber could respond. Trevor had heard the exchange, and his face was rigid with poorly concealed panic. Simone, can we talk privately? He asked quietly. I don't think that's appropriate, Simone replied. You're a married man now, Trevor. Again. You should focus on your new wife. She walked away before he could respond, leaving him standing there in his tuxedo, trapped in his own wedding reception with the specter of his crimes hovering over him like a storm cloud. Simone accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server and found a quiet corner to observe the party. Richard stood nearby, quietly protective. The reception proceeded with all the usual elements. Toasts from the best man and maid of honor. The first dance. The cake cutting. Trevor went through all the motions, but Simone could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes, the way he kept scanning the room as if looking for threats. He knew something was coming. He just didn't know what or when. After an hour, Simone decided she'd made her point. She found Trevor and Amber at their table, surrounded by well-wishers. "I'm going to head out," she told them. "I just wanted to wish you well one more time." Trevor stood abruptly. "Simone, wait. We really should talk." "There's nothing to talk about," Simone said. "The divorce is final. You got what you wanted. I've moved on. I'm happy for you both, truly. Enjoy your honeymoon. Enjoy your new life together. You've earned it." Every word was carefully chosen. Every emphasis deliberate. The subtext clear to Trevor even if Amber didn't understand. "Where are you going for your honeymoon?" Simone asked Amber. "Bali," Amber said, lighting up. "We leave Monday afternoon." "How wonderful," Simone said. "I hope you enjoy it." Trevor wouldn't be going to Bali Monday afternoon. He'd be in federal custody Monday morning. But Amber didn't need to know that yet. Simone turned and walked out of the reception hall with Richard beside her. They didn't speak until they were in the car. "How do you feel?" Richard asked. Simone thought about that. How did she feel, having just watched her ex-husband marry his pregnant mistress at a wedding funded by stolen money? Having smiled and congratulated them while knowing what was coming? "I feel free," she said finally. "I feel like that chapter of my life is completely closed. Trevor belongs to the past now. My future is my own." Richard drove her back to her apartment. At her door he paused. "The filing goes in at 9 a.m. Monday. Agent Morrison arrests Trevor at 7 a.m. After that, your life is going to change again. The media will probably contact you. Trevor's family might reach out. Are you prepared for that?" "I'm prepared for anything," Simone said. "I've been preparing for months." After Richard left, Simone changed out of her white suit and into comfortable clothes. She made herself dinner, poured a glass of wine, and sat by her window watching the city lights. Tomorrow morning, Trevor would wake up in his honeymoon suite with his new bride, probably already planning how to spend his stolen millions. And then everything would come crashing down. Simone raised her glass in a silent toast to justice, to new beginnings, and to the beautiful life she was building from the ashes of her destroyed marriage. Trevor's wedding day was over. His reckoning was about to begin. Trevor Hammond woke up at 6:15 a.m. in the honeymoon suite of the Riverside Hotel, feeling more satisfied than he had in months. Everything had gone perfectly. The wedding had been beautiful, the reception flawless. Even Simone showing up hadn't ruined anything, though her presence had unnerved him throughout the evening. Beside him, Amber slept peacefully, her dark hair spread across the pillow. His wife. His new life. His fresh start. He'd done it. He'd gotten away with everything. The divorce settlement he'd offered Simone had been accepted without argument. She'd signed away her rights to the house, to his business, to everything that mattered. She'd walked away with a fraction of what the marriage was worth, too heartbroken or stupid to fight him. The money he'd moved offshore was secure. The property he'd purchased under shell companies was safely hidden. His company's board had no idea about the embezzled funds because he'd carefully doctored the books to blame any discrepancies on accounting errors. In a few hours, he and Amber would fly to Bali for 2 weeks of luxury and relaxation. When they returned, they'd move into the penthouse condo he'd bought in Florida, and Amber would have the baby. Life would be perfect. He reached over to check his phone, planning to order room service for breakfast. That's when he heard the knock at the door. Not a polite hotel staff knock. A hard, authoritative pounding that made him sit up straight in bed. "Trevor Hammond, this is the FBI. Open the door." The words hit him like ice water. For a moment he thought he was still dreaming. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. The pounding came again, harder. "Mr. Hammond, open the door now or we'll use our key card." Amber woke up, confused and scared. "Trevor? What's going on?" "I don't know," Trevor said, though his heart was hammering and his hands were shaking. Deep down he knew exactly what was happening. Simone. That smile at the wedding. That knowing look in her eyes. She'd destroyed him. Trevor pulled on a bathrobe and went to the door. The moment he opened it, 3 FBI agents pushed inside. 2 men in dark suits, 1 woman with sharp eyes and an air of authority. "Trevor Hammond, you're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion and forgery," the woman said. She held up a badge. "I'm Special Agent Jennifer Morrison. You have the right to remain silent." Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Trevor's legs nearly gave out. This is a mistake. I haven't done anything wrong. We have search warrants for this hotel room, your home, your office, and all vehicles registered in your name, Agent Morrison continued as if he hadn't spoken. We also have warrants to freeze all bank accounts associated with you or your business entities. You're being charged with multiple counts of federal fraud. Amber had climbed out of bed, wrapping herself in a sheet. What is happening? Trevor, what are they talking about? One of the male agents was already photographing the room. Another was going through Trevor's laptop bag. Ma'am, are you Amber Rodriguez Hammond? Agent Morrison asked. Yes, Amber whispered. I'm his wife. We just got married yesterday. I'm sorry to interrupt your honeymoon, Agent Morrison said, and she sounded genuinely sympathetic. But your husband is under arrest. We'll need to ask you some questions as well, though you're not currently a suspect. We believe you may also be a victim of his fraudulent activities. Victim? What are you talking about? Amber's voice was rising toward panic. Trevor, tell them this is a mistake. Trevor couldn't speak. His mind was racing, trying to figure out how to fix this, how to escape, how to make this nightmare stop. But everywhere he looked, he saw federal agents efficiently dismantling his carefully constructed lies. They found his backup phone, the one he'd used to communicate with offshore banks. They found documents related to the shell companies. They found everything. Get dressed, Mr. Hammond, Agent Morrison said. You're coming with us. As they led him out of the hotel in handcuffs, Trevor saw other guests staring. Saw hotel staff whispering. Saw his perfect new life collapsing before it had even really begun. The federal courthouse was downtown, an imposing building where Trevor was processed like any other criminal. Fingerprints, photographs, paperwork. He asked for a lawyer and they allowed him a phone call. His attorney, Preston Webb, sounded shocked when Trevor explained the situation. They're claiming I committed fraud, Trevor said, trying to keep his voice steady. It's all a misunderstanding. Simone must have reported me for something, some kind of vindictive accusation. Trevor, federal agents don't arrest people based on vindictive accusations, Preston said carefully. They need substantial evidence for charges like this. What exactly have you been doing? Trevor couldn't answer that. Because the truth was, he'd done everything they were accusing him of and more. The arraignment happened that afternoon. Trevor stood before a federal judge, formally charged with 16 counts of wire fraud, 8 counts of embezzlement, 12 counts of tax evasion, and 4 counts of forgery. The prosecutor, a stern woman named Catherine Wells, laid out the government's case with devastating precision. Your Honor, Mr. Hammond has systematically defrauded his former spouse, his business partners, and his own company over a period of 18 months. He's moved approximately $1.6 million into offshore accounts and hidden property purchases. He represents a significant flight risk, given the amount of money he's hidden and his possession of a passport. The government requests that bail be set at $2 million. Preston argued for lower bail, claiming Trevor was a respected businessman with ties to the community. The judge looked unimpressed. Bail is set at $1.5 million, cash or bond, the judge announced. Mr. Hammond will surrender his passport. He's confined to the state and required to wear an electronic monitoring device. Trial date is set for 6 months from today. Trevor was led out of the courtroom in shock. $1.5 million. Even with the money he'd stolen, he couldn't access most of it now that his accounts were frozen. His company was in chaos. His reputation was destroyed. The media had picked up the story by Monday evening. Local developer arrested in major fraud case, read the headlines. By Tuesday it was worse. Newlywed arrested day after wedding for stealing from ex-wife. Details leaked. The affair, the hidden money, the forged documents. Everything Trevor had tried to keep secret was now public knowledge. His company's board called an emergency meeting and voted to terminate him immediately. The investors he defrauded filed their own lawsuits. His professional license was suspended pending the outcome of the criminal case. Amber left him on Wednesday. She showed up at the house where Trevor was under house arrest, wearing sunglasses to hide her tears. I can't do this, she told him. Everything you told me was a lie. The money, the business success, all of it. You stole from your wife. You stole from your company. I'm pregnant with a criminal's baby. Amber, please, Trevor begged. I can explain. I did it for us. I was building a future for us. You were building it with stolen money, Amber said. Do you know what it's been like for me? The media calling, my family asking questions, people staring at me everywhere I go? I married you 24 hours before you were arrested. I'm a complete fool. We can get through this together. No, we can't, Amber said. I'm filing for divorce. My lawyer will be in touch. She left, and Trevor was alone in the house he'd stolen from Simone, wearing an ankle monitor, facing trial and probable prison time. His lawyer brought him a copy of the civil lawsuit Simone had filed the same day as his arrest. Reading through it was like watching his life dissected and displayed for everyone to see. Patricia Hoffman's forensic accounting report was attached, detailing every transaction, every theft, every lie. Frank Delgado's surveillance reports documented the affair with timestamps and photographs. Bank records, forged documents, wire transfer receipts, everything was there. And at the center of it all was Simone's statement, written in clear, unemotional language that somehow made it even more damning. Over the course of our marriage, Trevor Hammond systematically stole from our joint assets while conducting an extramarital affair. He forged my signature on legal documents to steal property I co-owned. He embezzled from his own company to fund his affair and hide assets. He defrauded my elderly father of his inheritance. He lied to me repeatedly while planning to leave me destitute. His actions were deliberate, calculated, and conducted over an extended period with no remorse. Trevor read those words and felt something break inside him. Simone had known everything. While he thought he was so clever, she'd been building a case that would destroy him. While he celebrated his wedding, she'd been preparing his arrest. She'd played him perfectly. The trial was scheduled for 6 months out, but Trevor's lawyer advised him to consider a plea deal. The evidence against you is overwhelming, Preston said bluntly. If you go to trial and lose, you're looking at the maximum sentence for all charges. That could be 20 years or more. If you plead guilty, the prosecution might recommend a reduced sentence. How reduced? Trevor asked. 8 to 12 years probably. With good behavior, you could be out in 6 or 7. 6 or 7 years. His child would be in elementary school. His career would be over. His reputation destroyed. Everything he'd worked for gone. But the alternative was potentially twice as long. The plea negotiations took months. During that time, Trevor watched his life continue to fall apart. The civil lawsuit proceeded, and the judge froze all his assets pending the outcome. The house was seized. The offshore accounts were eventually tracked down and frozen as well. The properties he'd bought under shell companies were identified and seized as proceeds of crime. Everything he'd stolen was being recovered. Everything he'd built was being taken apart. And through it all he kept thinking about Simone. About her showing up at his wedding in that white suit with that knowing smile. About her wishing him all the happiness he deserved. She'd known. She'd known everything, and she'd let him have one perfect day before bringing it all crashing down. It was brilliant. It was ruthless. And Trevor finally understood that he'd completely underestimated the woman he'd betrayed. The plea deal was finalized 5 months after his arrest. Trevor Hammond pleaded guilty to 12 counts of wire fraud, 5 counts of embezzlement, and 2 counts of forgery in exchange for a recommended sentence of 10 years in federal prison. At the sentencing hearing, Simone was present. Trevor saw her sitting in the gallery, looking professional and composed in a dark blue suit. She was called as a witness to give a victim impact statement. She walked to the stand with quiet dignity and was sworn in. Then she looked directly at Trevor for the first time since the wedding. Your Honor, Trevor Hammond didn't just steal money from me, Simone began. He stole years of my life. He made me doubt my judgment, question my worth, and wonder if I was somehow responsible for the destruction of our marriage. He took my trust and weaponized it against me. He took my father's inheritance, money my father saved his whole life, and treated it like it was nothing. He looked me in the eye every day while planning to leave me with nothing and start a new life with someone else. Her voice never wavered. She didn't cry or show anger. She just stated the facts. But what he did to me financially isn't the worst part. The worst part is that he made me feel like a fool for having loved him, for having believed in him, for having built a life with him. That kind of betrayal leaves scars that money can't measure. She paused, then continued. I've rebuilt my life. I have a good job, a nice home, and genuine relationships with people who respect me. I've recovered financially and emotionally. But that doesn't mean Trevor should face lesser consequences for what he did. He made deliberate choices to hurt people who trusted him. He deserves to face the full weight of those choices. When she finished and stepped down, Trevor couldn't look at her. The judge thanked her for her statement and then delivered the sentence. Mr. Hammond, your crimes were calculated, extensive, and deeply harmful to multiple victims, including your former wife and your own family members. While you've accepted a plea agreement, the nature and scope of your crimes warrant serious consequences. I hereby sentence you to 10 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation and full restitution to all victims. 10 years. Trevor would be nearly 50 when he was released. His child would be in middle school. His life as he'd known it was over. As they led him out of the courtroom in handcuffs, Trevor looked one more time at Simone. She was standing now, talking quietly with her lawyer. She looked happy, healthy, strong. She looked like someone who'd won. And Trevor finally understood that his revenge, his attempt to steal everything from Simone and start fresh, had become the very thing that destroyed him. While he'd been focused on taking from her, she'd been quietly building the case that would cost him his freedom. She'd gotten her revenge. And it was complete. 2 weeks after Trevor's sentencing, Simone sat in her apartment surrounded by paperwork and felt something she hadn't experienced in over a year: genuine peace. The civil lawsuit had been settled. Trevor had been ordered to pay full restitution for everything he'd stolen, plus penalties. The funds were being recovered from the seized accounts and assets. Simone would get back her share of the joint accounts, her father would get his inheritance money, and Trevor's other victims would be compensated. The house had been sold, and since Simone was still legally the co-owner despite Trevor's forged documents, she received her full 50% of the proceeds. Combined with the restitution payments, she'd actually ended up in a better financial position than before the divorce. But more than the money, what Simone felt was a sense of closure. Trevor was in federal prison in another state. The legal case was resolved. The media attention was finally dying down. Her life was her own again. She used some of the money to move into a nicer apartment in a building with a rooftop garden and a view of the river. She furnished it carefully, choosing pieces that made her happy rather than trying to impress anyone. She hung her favorite artwork, filled her bookcases with books she actually wanted to read, and created a space that felt entirely hers. Work had become even more fulfilling. As director of data analytics and fraud detection, Simone was leading a team that was making real impact. They'd identified and helped prosecute 3 major healthcare fraud schemes in the past 6 months, saving insurance companies millions and protecting patients from unnecessary procedures. "You have a real gift for this," her boss Gerald told her during her annual review. "Your ability to see patterns and build cases is exceptional. Have you ever considered teaching?" That conversation led to Simone being invited to speak at a conference for fraud investigators. She talked about her experience identifying and documenting financial fraud, carefully avoiding the personal details but sharing the methodologies she developed. After the presentation, several people approached her with questions and thanks. "I went through something similar," one woman told her quietly. "My ex-husband stole from our business. But I didn't have the skills to prove it and he got away with everything. Hearing your story gives me hope that justice is possible." That conversation planted a seed. Simone started thinking about how many people were probably going through what she'd experienced: financial abuse and theft in relationships, without the resources or knowledge to fight back. She began researching the topic in her free time. She discovered that financial abuse was far more common than most people realized, often flying under the radar because it didn't leave physical scars. People stayed in bad relationships because their partners controlled all the money. They didn't know how to trace hidden assets or prove fraud. They felt powerless. Simone decided to do something about it. She started small, volunteering with a local organization that helped people escape abusive relationships. She taught classes on financial literacy and fraud detection. She helped victims document suspicious financial activity and connect with lawyers who could help them. The work was rewarding in a way her corporate job never had been. Seeing someone's face light up when they realized they had options, that they could fight back, that they weren't helpless, that was worth more than any salary. 6 months after Trevor's sentencing, a literary agent named Monica Park reached out to Simone. "I read about your case in the news," Monica said during their coffee meeting. "And I heard about the work you're doing helping other fraud victims. Have you ever thought about writing a book?" "A book about what?" Simone asked. "About your experience. About how you discovered the fraud, how you built your case, how you recovered. But more than that, a practical guide for people going through similar situations. How to recognize financial red flags, how to protect yourself, how to gather evidence, how to rebuild. There are millions of people who need that information." The idea excited Simone more than she expected. She'd been keeping detailed journals throughout the whole ordeal, documenting everything. Turning that into something that could help others felt like a way to transform her worst experience into something meaningful. She spent the next year writing Fraud and Freedom, A Survivor's Guide to Financial Betrayal and Recovery, was published the following spring. The book combines Simone's personal story with practical advice, resource lists, and guidance from the legal and financial experts she'd worked with. The response was overwhelming. The book became a bestseller in the personal finance category. Simone was invited to appear on television programs and podcasts to discuss financial abuse and recovery. She connected with support groups and advocacy organizations around the country. "Your book saved my life," one reader wrote to her. "I thought I was crazy, that I was bad with money, that I couldn't manage our finances. My husband told me that for years. Then I read your book and realized he was stealing from me and making me think it was my fault. I'm filing for divorce and building my own case now, thanks to you." Letters like that kept Simone going when the work was hard, when she had to revisit painful memories to speak at events, when the media wanted to focus on the sensational aspects of her story rather than the practical lessons. But she also made sure to maintain balance in her new life. She kept painting, kept attending her book club, kept traveling. She took a solo trip to Portugal and spent 2 weeks exploring Lisbon and Porto, eating good food and meeting interesting people and reminding herself that life had so much to offer beyond work and recovery. Her father's health had improved since the stress of the stolen inheritance was resolved. Jerome was proud of his daughter's strength and kept a copy of her book in his assisted living apartment to show to anyone who would listen. "That's my girl," he'd say. "She's a fighter." Simone reconnected with friends she'd lost touch with during her marriage to Trevor. Some of those friendships were easy to rebuild. Others had been damaged beyond repair by the years of absence and Trevor's manipulations. She accepted both outcomes and focused on the relationships that enriched her life. She also started going to therapy, something she probably should have done earlier but had resisted. Dr. Yolanda Mitchell was a specialist in trauma and abuse recovery, and their sessions helped Simone process not just the fraud and betrayal, but the deeper patterns that had made her vulnerable to Trevor's manipulation. "You're not responsible for his actions," Dr. Mitchell told her during one session. "But understanding how the dynamic worked can help you make different choices in the future." "Do you think I'll ever trust someone again?" Simone asked. "Enough to be in a relationship?" "I think trust is something you'll approach differently," Dr. Mitchell said. "You'll be more cautious, more observant. That's not a bad thing. It's wisdom earned through experience." Simone thought about that a lot. She wasn't ready for romance yet, but she was starting to be open to the idea that someday maybe she could share her life with someone who deserved that trust. About 18 months after Trevor's sentencing, Simone attended a charity fundraiser for an organization that helped victims of financial abuse. The event was at a nice hotel downtown, and Simone had been invited to speak briefly about her work. That's where she met Christopher Grant. He was there with his sister, who'd used Simone's book to escape her own financially abusive marriage. After Simone's speech, Christopher approached her. "My sister wanted me to thank you," he said. "Your book gave her the courage to leave her husband and rebuild her life. She's doing really well now." "I'm so glad," Simone said sincerely. They talked for a while about his sister's recovery, about the work Simone was doing, about the importance of financial literacy education. Christopher was a high school teacher who taught economics and personal finance. He was passionate about helping his students understand money management and avoid the traps he'd seen too many adults fall into. "Most people learn about money through trial and error," he said. "Usually error. I try to give my students the tools to make better choices." Simone found herself enjoying the conversation. Christopher was thoughtful and genuine, with an easy laugh and an obvious commitment to helping others. When he asked if she'd be interested in having coffee sometime to discuss potential collaborations between his school and her advocacy work, she agreed. That coffee turned into dinner. That dinner turned into a movie. Slowly, carefully, Simone found herself opening up to the possibility of connection again. Christopher was everything Trevor hadn't been. He was transparent about his life, his finances, his goals. He respected her boundaries and didn't rush her. He was interested in her work and her thoughts, not just what she could do for him. He made her laugh. "I'm not looking for anything serious right now," Simone told him after they'd been seeing each other for a few months. "My last relationship ended badly and I'm still working through some things." "That's fine," Christopher said. "I'm not in a rush. I like spending time with you. We can take this as slow as you need." And they did. They took it slow and steady, building something real on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. Christopher never pushed for more than Simone was ready to give. He never tried to control or manipulate. He was just there. Steady and kind and genuine. 2 years after Trevor's sentencing, Simone realized she was genuinely happy. Not just recovered or moving on, but actually happy. She had work she loved, friends she trusted, family she'd reconnected with, and someone special she was building something with. She occasionally wondered about Trevor in prison, whether he'd changed or learned anything or felt remorse. But mostly she didn't think about him at all. He was part of her past, a chapter that had ended. Her present and future belonged to her alone. Sometimes she got letters forwarded from Trevor's prison. She never opened them. She told his attorney that she didn't want any contact, and she meant it. Whatever Trevor wanted to say, whatever excuses or apologies or justifications he had, she didn't need to hear them. She'd said everything she needed to say at his sentencing hearing. Now she was done. Her life was full and rich and entirely her own. That was the best revenge of all, not just seeing Trevor punished but building a life so good that his presence in her past became irrelevant. Trevor Hammond's first year in federal prison was harder than anything he'd ever experienced. The federal facility where he was incarcerated was in another state, far from everything familiar. The days were monotonous and rigid, controlled by schedules and rules and the constant presence of guards. He shared a cell with a man named Jerome Banks who was serving time for tax evasion. Jerome was in his 60s, quiet and resigned to his situation. He gave Trevor advice during those first difficult weeks. Don't make waves. Don't trust anyone completely. Do your time quietly and maybe you'll get out early with good behavior. Trevor tried to follow that advice. He kept his head down, stayed out of trouble, and tried not to think about everything he'd lost. But at night, alone in his bunk, the thoughts came anyway. He thought about his wedding day, about Simone sitting in the back of the church with that mysterious smile. He thought about the moment federal agents knocked on his honeymoon suite door. He thought about watching his entire life collapse in a matter of days. He'd been so sure he was clever, that his planning was thorough, that Simone was too heartbroken to fight back. He'd underestimated her completely, and it had cost him everything. Amber had filed for divorce while Trevor was awaiting trial. The divorce was finalized 3 months after his sentencing. She'd wanted nothing from him except her freedom and a guarantee that he'd terminate his parental rights to the baby. Trevor had signed the papers. What choice did he have? He was in prison, financially destroyed, with no way to provide for a child. Amber was better off without him, and his child was better off never knowing who their biological father was. She'd sent him one letter after the baby was born, a daughter named Sophia. "I wanted you to know she's healthy and beautiful," Amber wrote. "But this is the last contact we'll have. I'm raising her as a single mother with help from my family. She'll never know about you. Please don't try to contact us when you're released. We've moved on." Trevor had stared at that letter for hours, thinking about the daughter he'd never know, the family he'd destroyed before it even began. He'd wanted a fresh start, a new life. Instead, he'd ended up with nothing. His own family had mostly abandoned him too. His mother sent occasional letters but never visited. His sister refused all contact, furious about the shame he'd brought to the family name. His father had died 2 years before all this happened, and Trevor was grateful he hadn't lived to see his sons fall from grace. The trial had been covered extensively in the media. Real estate developer sentenced to 10 years for massive fraud, read the headlines. His face was all over the news, his crimes detailed in article after article. Former colleagues and friends were interviewed, most of them expressing shock and disappointment. Hammond Development Corporation went into bankruptcy. The investors he'd defrauded sued the company and each other. The whole thing collapsed messily, taking jobs and reputations down with it. Trevor's professional reputation was destroyed beyond repair. Even after he was released, no one in the real estate industry would ever work with him again. His licenses were permanently revoked. His name was synonymous with fraud and betrayal. In prison, Trevor tried to use his time productively. He took classes in accounting and business ethics, which felt absurdly ironic. He worked in the prison library helping other inmates with legal research. He attended counseling sessions that were supposed to help him understand his actions and develop better decision-making skills. The counselor, Dr. Raymond Foster, asked him pointed questions. "Why did you steal from your wife instead of just divorcing her honestly?" Trevor had struggled to answer. "I thought I deserved more. I built the business, I made the money. I didn't want to split everything 50-50. But legally, assets acquired during a marriage belong to both spouses in your state," Dr. Foster pointed out. "You knew that. So why did you think the law shouldn't apply to you?" Trevor didn't have a good answer for that either. "I think I believed I was smarter than everyone else," he said finally. "I thought I could get away with it. I thought Simone would just accept whatever I offered and move on. How do you feel about that now?" "I was an idiot," Trevor said bluntly. "She destroyed me. She was 10 steps ahead the whole time and I never saw it coming. Do you think you deserved what happened to you?" Trevor thought about that. Did he deserve 10 years in prison? Losing everything? Never seeing his daughter? Being labeled a criminal for the rest of his life? I deserved consequences, he admitted. I stole. I lied. I hurt people. But 10 years seems like a lot for financial crimes. The judge explained that the severity of your sentence reflected the calculated nature of your crimes and the harm you caused. Dr. Foster reminded him. You didn't make one mistake. You made hundreds of deliberate choices over 18 months to steal and deceive. That matters. Trevor knew it was true. He just wished he'd understood it before he destroyed his life. 3 years into his sentence, Trevor received information that made his situation even worse. His attorney called with an update on the restitution payments. All your assets have been liquidated, Preston Webb explained. The house, the offshore accounts, the properties, everything. The proceeds are being distributed to your victims. Simone Lawrence received full restitution plus penalties. Your father-in-law got his inheritance back. The investors from Hammond Development are being compensated. But Trevor, there's still a shortfall. What does that mean? Trevor asked. It means you owe more in restitution than you had in assets. When you're released, you'll be required to make payments until the debt is satisfied. The amount remaining is approximately $300,000. Trevor felt sick. Even after losing everything, he'd still be in debt for years after his release. There's more, Preston said. The IRS has finished their audit of your taxes. You owe back taxes and penalties on the money you stole and didn't report as income. That's another $200,000. $500,000 in debt. No career prospects. A criminal record that would follow him forever. What am I supposed to do? Trevor asked. Find a job when you get out. Make payments. Stay out of trouble. It's going to be hard, Trevor. Your life after prison isn't going to be easy. That night, Trevor lay in his bunk and thought about Simone. About how she'd rebuilt her life while he rotted in prison. He'd heard through his lawyer that she'd written a book, that she was successful and respected. She turned her worst experience into something meaningful while he'd turned his bad choices into a prison sentence. He wanted to hate her for it. Wanted to blame her for his situation. But deep down he knew the truth. Simone hadn't ruined his life. He'd ruined his own life and she'd just made sure he faced the consequences. In his 4th year of incarceration, Trevor learned that Simone was in a relationship with someone new. His mother had mentioned it in one of her infrequent letters, having heard it through mutual acquaintances. I saw in the newspaper that Simone gave a speech at some charity event, his mother wrote. She was photographed with a man, a school teacher apparently. The article said they'd been together for a year. She looked happy, Trevor. I'm glad she moved on. Trevor crumpled the letter. Simone had moved on. She had someone new, someone who presumably treated her well and didn't steal from her. Meanwhile, Trevor was still paying for his mistakes and would continue paying for years to come. He tried to write her a letter once, thinking maybe he could apologize, try to explain. But what would he say? Sorry I stole your money and tried to leave you destitute? Sorry I got caught? He tore up the letter before finishing it. Simone didn't want to hear from him. She'd made that clear through her attorney. And honestly, he had nothing to say that would matter. The years crawled by. 5 years, 6 years, 7. Trevor became a model prisoner, following all the rules, staying out of trouble. He was eventually transferred to a minimum security facility, which was slightly better but still prison. He thought constantly about his release date, about the life he'd try to build afterward. He knew it would be difficult. Finding housing with a criminal record. Finding a job with his background. Paying off his massive debts. Rebuilding any kind of normal life. But he also knew he had no choice. This was the consequence of his actions. This was what he deserved for thinking he could steal from the people who trusted him and get away with it. In his 8th year, Trevor received news that his mother had suffered a stroke. She survived but was in poor health. He applied for compassionate release to visit her, but the application was denied. She was stable, not dying, and he hadn't served enough of his sentence to qualify. He called her from the prison phone, listening to her struggle to speak clearly. I love you, Trevor, she managed to say. I wish things had turned out differently. Me too, Mom, Trevor said, his voice breaking. After the call, he sat in his cell and cried. Not for himself, but for his mother who'd never done anything wrong but was suffering because of his choices. For his daughter who didn't even know he existed. For Amber who'd been caught in his web of lies. For Simone who'd been betrayed by the person who was supposed to cherish her. For the first time since his arrest, Trevor felt genuine remorse. Not just regret about getting caught, but actual understanding of the harm he'd caused. It didn't change anything. He was still in prison, still facing years of debt, still living with the consequences. But something shifted inside him. He stopped making excuses. Stopped blaming Simone for being smart enough to catch him. Stopped thinking of himself as a victim of circumstance. He was a criminal. He'd made terrible choices. He deserved what happened to him. With 2 years left on his sentence, Trevor started preparing for release. He took every job training program the prison offered. He saved his small prison wages. He made a plan for where he'd live, a halfway house initially, then hopefully a cheap apartment. He researched jobs that would hire people with felony records. He'd never have his old life back. Never have his career or his reputation or his wealth. But maybe he could build something small and honest. Maybe he could spend the rest of his life trying to make up for what he'd done. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. 2 years after Trevor entered prison, Simone stood in front of a crowd of 300 people at a conference center in Chicago, giving the keynote speech at the National Conference on Financial Abuse Prevention. She'd come a long way from the heartbroken woman who discovered her husband's betrayal in their kitchen on a Tuesday night. Financial abuse is one of the most insidious forms of control, Simone told the audience. It's invisible to outsiders. It doesn't leave bruises. But it traps people just as effectively as any locked door. When someone controls all the money, controls your access to resources, makes you dependent on them for survival, leaving becomes almost impossible. She spoke about warning signs. A partner who insists on controlling all finances, who monitors spending obsessively, who hides financial information, who deliberately sabotages the other person's ability to earn money or build credit. I had a good job and my own income, Simone explained. But Trevor systematically stole from our joint accounts while making me believe our finances were secure. He made me think I was a full partner in our marriage while secretly preparing to leave me with nothing. That's financial abuse, even if it doesn't fit the typical pattern. After the speech, people lined up to talk to her. Women and men who'd experienced similar betrayals. Therapists and lawyers and advocates who worked with survivors. Everyone wanted to thank her for speaking out, for providing resources, for making this type of abuse more visible. My husband did exactly what yours did, one woman told her tearfully. Affair, hidden money, the whole thing. But I didn't have your skills to prove it. He got away with most of it. Your book helped me understand that I wasn't crazy, that what happened was real abuse. I'm so sorry you went through that, Simone said, squeezing the woman's hand. But I'm glad you got out. That's what matters most. These moments, connecting with other survivors, helping them feel less alone, had become the most meaningful part of Simone's new life. Her book had opened doors to speaking engagements, consulting work, and advocacy opportunities she'd never imagined. She'd started a small consulting business on the side, teaching companies and organizations how to identify and prevent financial fraud. She worked with law firms to help build cases for fraud victims. She consulted on curriculum for financial literacy programs. The work was fulfilling in a way her corporate job had been before, though she kept her position as director of data analytics. She liked having both, the stability of her regular career and the passion of her advocacy work. Her personal life had flourished too. Christopher had become an important part of her life over the past year. They'd continued taking things slow, building trust gradually. He'd met her father, who'd approved immediately. That's a good man, Jerome had told Simone after dinner at his assisted living facility. He treats you right. He looks at you like you're the most interesting person in the room. He does, doesn't he? Simone had said, smiling. Christopher was patient with her caution about money and commitment. When they decided to take a weekend trip together, he'd send her his share of the costs through a payment app without her even asking, keeping everything transparent and equal. I know your ex made you feel like you couldn't trust anyone with finances, Christopher had said. I want you to always feel secure with me. We're partners, which means we're both responsible and both informed. It was a small thing, but it meant everything to Simone. Real partnership looked nothing like what she'd had with Trevor. One Saturday morning, Simone and Christopher were having coffee on the rooftop of her apartment building when he asked her a question she'd been half expecting. Have you ever thought about what you want for the future? He asked. Long term, I mean. Do you want to get married again someday? Have children? I'm not asking for me necessarily. I just want to know what you're thinking about. Simone looked out at the city skyline thinking about the question. 2 years ago, she would have said absolutely not to marriage. The idea of legally tying her life to someone else's, of sharing finances and property and building something together, would have terrified her. But she'd done a lot of healing since then. A lot of therapy, a lot of personal growth. She'd learned that Trevor's betrayal said everything about him and nothing about her worth or judgment. She'd learned that trust was a choice you made carefully with people who'd earned it. "I think I could get married again," she said slowly. "To the right person with the right foundation. Someone who values transparency and partnership. Someone who sees me as an equal, not as someone to control or manipulate." "What about children?" "I'm not sure," Simone admitted. "I'm 38. If I wanted children, the window is closing. I think I'd be okay either way. I built a life I love. If children fit into that life with the right partner, wonderful. If not, I'm still complete." Christopher nodded, absorbing this. "I think you're one of the most complete people I've ever met. You don't need anyone else to be whole. But you're generous enough to let people in anyway." It was maybe the nicest thing anyone had ever said to her. They'd been together for about 18 months when Christopher suggested meeting his family. Simone had met his sister already, the one who'd used Simone's book to escape her own bad marriage, but not his parents or his other siblings. "Fair warning, they're a lot," Christopher said. "Big family, lots of opinions, very involved in each other's lives. My mom will probably ask when we're getting married within the first hour." "That doesn't scare me," Simone laughed. The family dinner was indeed chaotic but also warm and welcoming. Christopher's mother, Patricia, hugged Simone like they'd known each other for years. His father asked about her work with genuine interest. His siblings teased Christopher mercilessly about finally finding someone who can put up with him. It felt like family, like belonging. Different from her own small family, just her and her father now, but equally valuable. "I like them," Simone told Christopher on the drive home. "They're lovely." "They loved you," Christopher replied. "My mom pulled me aside and told me not to screw this up, that you're special." "Smart woman, your mom." 3 years after Trevor's sentencing, Simone received an email that surprised her. It was from Amber. "Dear Simone," the email began. "I hope it's okay that I'm reaching out. I got your email address from your website. I wanted to apologize for my part in what happened. I knew Trevor was married when we started seeing each other. I told myself it was okay because he said you were getting divorced anyway, but that was a lie I told myself to justify my actions. I caused you pain and I'm sorry." The email went on to explain that Amber had struggled significantly after Trevor's arrest. The public shame, the financial difficulties raising her daughter alone. She'd gone through her own period of anger and betrayal when she learned the full extent of Trevor's lies. "I realize now that Trevor lied to both of us in different ways," Amber wrote. "I thought he was successful and honest. I thought the money was his. I thought I was building a life with a good man. Learning that everything was stolen, that I was complicit in your pain even unknowingly, has been difficult to process. I've been in therapy working through my own poor choices. I wanted you to know that I think about what I did and I'm genuinely sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand I was wrong." Simone sat with the email for several days before responding. Her first instinct was to delete it, to keep that boundary firmly in place. But something about Amber's words felt genuine. Not asking for anything, just acknowledging harm and taking responsibility. Finally, Simone wrote back, "Amber, I appreciate you reaching out and taking responsibility. What happened was painful, but I've moved past it. I hope you've built a good life for yourself and your daughter. I don't think we'll ever be friends, but I accept your apology and I wish you well." She never heard from Amber again, and that was fine. The exchange brought closure to a part of the story that had been left dangling. On the 4th anniversary of Trevor's sentencing, Simone realized she'd gone an entire week without thinking about him. He'd become such a small part of her consciousness that days could pass without him crossing her mind. She was truly free. That year, Simone's consulting business had grown enough that she decided to leave her corporate job and focus on it full-time. She'd saved carefully, invested wisely, and built a financial cushion that gave her security and freedom. "Are you sure?" Gerald asked when she gave notice. "You've been such an asset to this company." "I'm sure," Simone said. "I'm grateful for everything I've learned here, but I'm ready to focus on helping fraud survivors full-time. It's where my passion is." Her business, Lawrence Financial Recovery Consulting, helped individuals and organizations deal with fraud, financial abuse, and asset recovery. She worked with lawyers to build cases, taught workshops on financial literacy and fraud prevention, and provided one-on-one consulting to people trying to rebuild after financial devastation. The work was demanding but deeply satisfying. Every client she helped recover stolen assets, every person she taught to recognize red flags, every success story felt like a victory not just for them but for everyone who'd ever been victimized by financial abuse. She hired 2 employees, Both women who'd experienced financial abuse themselves and wanted to help others. Together they built something meaningful and successful. 5 years after Trevor's sentencing, Christopher took Simone back to the rooftop of her apartment building where they'd had that first conversation about the future. "I have something to ask you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Simone's heart raced. She knew what was coming, but she still felt surprised and nervous and excited all at once. "Simone Lawrence, you're the strongest, smartest, kindest person I know," Christopher said. "You've built an incredible life from the ashes of betrayal. You've helped hundreds of people rebuild their own lives. You've let me into your world carefully and thoughtfully, and I'm grateful for every moment. I love you. I respect you. I want to build a life with you as true partners. Will you marry me?" The ring was beautiful but not ostentatious. Simple, elegant, perfect. Just like Christopher's proposal, honest and direct and focused on partnership rather than grand gestures. "Yes," Simone said, and realized she meant it completely. She wasn't afraid anymore. She'd built a life where she was strong enough to stand alone and wise enough to recognize when someone was worthy of standing beside her. They got married the following spring in a small ceremony with close friends and family. Simone wore a dress she loved, not because it was what tradition dictated but because it made her happy. Her father walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes. "I'm so proud of you, baby girl," he whispered before giving her hand to Christopher. "You've come through fire and came out gold." The ceremony was simple and meaningful. The vows they wrote focused on partnership, respect, honesty, and building something together on a foundation of trust. When Christopher slipped the ring on her finger, Simone felt only joy and certainty. This was what marriage should be. Not control or deception or one person taking advantage of another, but two people choosing to build something together while maintaining their own identities and strength. The reception was held at a beautiful garden venue. There was dancing and laughter and celebration. Simone's friend Denise gave a toast about watching Simone transform from heartbroken and betrayed to powerful and happy. "She rebuilt herself from scratch," Denise said, raising her glass. "And then she helped hundreds of others do the same. She's proof that the best revenge isn't destroying the people who hurt you. It's building a life so beautiful that their betrayal becomes irrelevant." The guests cheered, and Simone felt surrounded by love and support. This was her community, her chosen family, the people who'd stood by her through the worst and celebrated with her through the best. 6 years after Trevor's sentencing, Simone received notification that he'd been released from prison early for good behavior. He'd served 8 years of his 10-year sentence. The information came through her lawyer. "He's out and on supervised probation," Richard told her. "He's required to stay in a different state, and there's a no-contact order in place. He can't reach out to you directly. I wanted you to know in case you saw it in the news." "Thank you for telling me," Simone said. "But honestly, it doesn't matter to me where Trevor is or what he's doing. That chapter of my life is completely closed." And it was. Trevor's release from prison didn't affect her life at all. She was married to a wonderful man, running a successful business, living in a beautiful home she and Christopher had bought together. She had friends, family, purpose, and joy. Sometimes she thought about the woman she'd been 8 years ago, the one who'd discovered that credit card charge for jewelry and had her world shattered. That woman had been devastated and scared and uncertain about her future. Simone wished she could go back and tell her that everything would be okay. Better than okay. That she'd survive, rebuild, and create something more beautiful than what she'd lost. But that woman didn't need reassurance from the future. She'd had everything she needed inside herself all along. Strength, intelligence, determination, and the willingness to fight for the life she deserved. 7 years after Trevor's sentencing, Simone published her second book. Building After Betrayal, Creating Financial Security and Emotional Wellness, focused on the practical and emotional aspects of recovery after financial abuse or major betrayal. The book became another bestseller, reaching even more people than the first one. Simone received letters and messages from readers all over the country, all over the world, thanking her for helping them find their strength. One letter stood out. It was from a woman named Rachel who discovered her husband's financial fraud and used Simone's books and methods to build her own case. "He's in prison now," Rachel wrote. "I've recovered most of what he stole. I have a good job and a safe home. My children and I are healing. None of this would have been possible without your work. You showed me that I could be strong enough to fight back and smart enough to win. Thank you for turning your pain into something that helps others. You've changed my life." Simone kept that letter in her desk drawer and read it whenever she had a difficult day. This was why she'd gone through everything she'd gone through. Not just to survive her own betrayal, but to help others survive theirs. On their second wedding anniversary, Christopher surprised Simone with a weekend trip to a beach town they both loved. They spent the days walking on the beach, eating good food and talking about their future. "I've been thinking," Christopher said as they watched the sunset from their hotel balcony. "What would you think about having a baby?" Simone was quiet for a moment, processing the question. She was 41 now. It wasn't impossible, but it would require intention and probably medical assistance. "I thought you were okay with not having children," she said. "I am," Christopher replied. "I'm happy with our life exactly as it is. But I've watched you with my nieces and nephews, and I think you'd be an amazing mother. If it's something you want, I want it too. If you don't, that's completely fine. I just wanted to make sure we talked about it while there's still a window." Simone thought about it. Really thought about it. Did she want to bring a child into the world? Did she want to be a mother? "Let me think about it," she said. "Can I have some time?" "All the time you need," Christopher assured her. She spent the next month considering the question from every angle. She talked to her therapist about it. She thought about her capacity for love and nurturing, her financial stability, her support system. She thought about what she wanted her life to look like in 5 years, 10 years, 20. Finally, she knew her answer. "I don't think I want to have a baby," she told Christopher one evening. "I love our life. I love the work I do. I love the freedom we have to travel and pursue our passions. Adding a child would change all of that, and I don't think I want that change. I'm content with how things are." "Okay," Christopher said simply. "Then we won't." "I meant what I said. I'm happy either way." It was liberating to make that choice without pressure, without judgment, with a partner who respected her decision completely. This was what healthy partnership looked like. 8 years after Trevor's sentencing, Simone was invited to testify before a congressional committee studying financial abuse and fraud. She spoke about the gaps in legal protection for victims, the challenges of proving financial abuse, and the need for better resources and support systems. "Financial abuse destroys lives," she told the committee. "It traps people in dangerous situations. It steals futures. And our current systems often make it difficult for victims to get justice or recover what was stolen. We need stronger laws, better enforcement, and more support for survivors trying to rebuild." Her testimony was part of a push for new legislation that would strengthen protections for financial abuse victims and make it easier to prosecute financial crimes in intimate relationships. The work was slow and frustrating, but Simone stayed committed. Change happened gradually, through persistent effort and advocacy. She was willing to put in that effort. 10 years after Trevor's sentencing, Simone received a letter from her lawyer. Trevor had requested permission to send her a message through legal channels. "Do you want to receive it?" Richard asked. "You're under no obligation to read anything he sends." Simone thought about it. Trevor had been out of prison for 2 years now. She knew from public records that he was working as a warehouse manager in another state, living modestly, making his restitution payments. She was curious about what he might want to say after all this time. "Send it to you," she told Richard. "Read it first. If it's anything inappropriate or an attempt to contact me directly, destroy it. If it's a genuine apology or message of some kind, let me know and I'll decide if I want to read it." A week later, Richard called. "I read Trevor's letter. It's actually quite remorseful. He takes full responsibility for what he did. He doesn't ask for anything or try to justify his actions. He just apologizes and says he hopes you're doing well. Do you want me to send it to you?" "No," Simone said after a moment. "Just tell him I received his message and I accept his apology. But I don't want any further contact." "Will do," Richard said. Simone hung up and felt a sense of finality. Trevor had apologized. She'd accepted it. That door was now completely closed. She didn't need his apology to move on, she'd already moved on years ago. But there was something satisfying about knowing he'd taken responsibility, about knowing that her refusal to be a victim had made such an impact that even the person who'd victimized her had finally understood the weight of what he'd done. That night, Simone and Christopher had dinner with friends. They laughed and told stories and made plans for an upcoming trip. Simone looked around the table at the people in her life, genuine friends, her loving husband, her chosen family, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She'd built this. She'd taken the wreckage of betrayal and built something beautiful. She transformed her pain into purpose, her victimization into strength, her losses into wisdom that helped others. The best revenge, she'd learned, wasn't destruction. It was creation. It was building a life so full and rich and meaningful that the person who tried to destroy you became irrelevant. It was taking back your power and using it to help others reclaim theirs. Trevor had tried to steal everything from her. Instead, she'd used that experience to build everything she had now: a successful business, a happy marriage, meaningful work, and the deep satisfaction of knowing she'd turned her worst experience into something that helped hundreds of people. She'd won. Not because Trevor was punished, though that justice had been important, but because she'd refused to stay broken. She'd refused to let his betrayal define her. She'd rebuilt herself into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than before. That was the real victory. That was the happy ending. And it was hers.